All right, what's happening, ladies and gentlemen of the YouTube world? This is Chris, and this is my channel, Bar None 11970. Hopefully, you guys are having a great day. And I know by the title of this, there's going to be many people that are going to be confused, full of doubt, things like that. I totally understand. The idea is to get people to stop thinking in the old ways and realizing that for change to happen effectively, you have to have understanding. Now, some of the things I'm going to talk about are things that people may have heard of before if you've been subscribed to my channel and watched several times. But I get a lot of new people, and the idea is to help people that are new to know what is going on so they can understand better that trying to put yourself in the system that is corrupt, thinking that this will be the time it will change, when you make a difference and understand what's really happening, you can change the system. And unfortunately, the emotions are, and I see it in all the comments, and that's why it inspired me to do this particular video. I see a lot of people, and the emotions are running high. And I see in the comments, and you can look, a lot of people mad saying, oh, you have to vote, this time you have to vote. Before I even get into how the votes don't even count, it doesn't matter who creates the votes, it's who tabulates them. And after we see all these WikiLeaks and all this corruption, and all even people like Trump admitting that there is corruption in the media and with the government, we're putting our trust in the corrupt system, thinking, oh, this will be the difference of the time. And if you see the image that I have on the screen, where it says the people don't know their true power, and I wrote in votes don't count, you see all the people on a balancing beam with the politician or whoever at the edge of a cliff, and they're all standing there supporting them, literally, holding up their signs. And you see the one person that I circled walking away. Now, what do you think would happen to that politician in this symbolism if everybody decided to no longer support that individual, but walk away? What do you think would happen? Well, that politician would fall away. He would no longer be a problem. But the problem is, with our voting in a corrupt system, in our participation in the corrupt system, we are supporting them. So how the many can be controlled by the few, because that one politician is relying on the group, the masses of the people, to keep him supported. So it shows how easily the few can influence the many, and if you just walk away and not play the game, you will win. And the problem is, especially if you're new to this game and this truth movement, because a lot of people being awoken by all this stuff. Like I've said, it's like a tsunami. You can't stop it. But if you know it's coming, if you see the signs, you can get out of its way the best as possible. Like if you just a tsunami itself, if you're at the beach and all of a sudden you see the water for some reason pull back into the ocean, well, the silly, naive people, the stupid people, the curious people, the ones that don't know what that means, might walk further out and say, "Wow, this is cool. I'm seeing an area of the beach that I've never been able to access. I think this is cool. Let me take some pictures. Let me see how far out I can go." The smart people that know what's coming say, wait a minute, the beach is retracting. That means there's a possibility of a severe situation. I need to get myself away from that situation. And you increase your chances through knowledge. So I'm going to educate people that might be new. So some of the people that watch this may have heard this so many times, but it's good to have this information. So I'm going to break it down to the basics. And one of the videos I highly recommend that you watch, if you haven't seen it of mine, is The Truth of the United States, Law and You. The extended version is the best one. If you go to my playlist, it is my #1 video. It's got over 300,000 views. And Lee Man says hi, so I want to say hi really quick. If you want to leave comments, you can. There's a live chat. But I'm going to educate you on why votes don't work. It's a corrupt system. We're starting to see this. This is not brand new. This is something I've been preaching for years. Some people have been preaching for decades. This has been going on for a long, long, long time. It's just starting to come out now, to the fact that some of the willfully ignorant, I would like to say, and that's not an insult. I mean, it's a choice. But all the people are all of a sudden seeing this stuff and thinking, wow, this is a first? No, this is the first time it's actually becoming mainstream. But if you research the Act of 1871, that's where it all started. It all had to do with the Civil War. Now, I find that ironic that the Civil War is called civil. Please explain what's civil about any war. But what that war's purpose was. Now, slavery was a part of it, but not the sole reason. It had to do with the South wanting to separate from the North due to the fact of the unfair taxes, due to unfair treatment, and wanting to be sovereign. That's why Texas is always saying how they're a sovereign state and they want to secede from the Union. I mean, you're allowed to do that, believe it or not, if you don't feel you're in a just situation. But the whole situation of the Civil War was to add in and change amendments. And I'm going to start with the ones that are relevant and how they make sense. So, if you look at the 13th Amendment, and that was December 6th of 1865, and it defines, I'm going to define it, it legally defines the word slavery. It's defined as involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So in other words, what they're saying is slavery is defined. They legally defined it in the 13th Amendment. They defined it as involuntary servitude. Now again, if you've heard my videos before, some of you will know this, but I got like 60 new subscribers just last night alone. So there's a lot of new people that may not know this stuff. So Peacemaker says hello. How are you? I'll read some of those in a little bit because this is important. So all you have to do is get your own Constitution book. You can get a leaflet. You can get it on eBay for like $4 or less. The Constitution of the United States. The United States, the word United States is nothing but a corporate entity. In 1871, we became, our government, the 41st Congress, in a nutshell, because of potentially going bankrupt due to all the costs it would take after the Civil War. We gave the British Empire, we gave the Bank of London, the Rothschilds, the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., as collateral for the loans that they gave us so we would not go bankrupt during the Civil War. Washington, D.C. is not part of America. It's on the actual land of America, of North America, but it is not part of the United States as far as what you think it is. In 1933, the country went bankrupt, and you know what happens when you have, for example, a mortgage that you don't pay, they take your house. But we're not going to get into that part. So the 13th Amendment talks about involuntary servitude. Okay, the next part is the 14th Amendment, which is July 9th of 1868. Now, all persons born and naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. And I'm just going to read that part because you have to understand words. And if you don't understand words, like they say, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So if you were to get the Black's Law Dictionary, and I would highly recommend at least the 5th edition or less. Let me see if I have mine around. Give me a second. I don't have it around, but I pretty much know it by heart at this point. If you look up the legal term of person, a person is labeled. Now, I'm talking legal definition, not the normal word that you would say. If you look at somebody and say, oh, that's a person, you know what that means. But legally, the word means something different. The legal definition of the word person is a corporation. It's a piece of property, which has some of the rights of a human being. So they are legally separating the difference between human being and the word person. They are not the same thing, even though in regular language, that's what you assume it is. So, when you see all persons born or naturalized, in other words, you were born in this country or you came here legally and became a quote-unquote citizen, and under the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. So they legally define the word citizen, which if you look it up in the Black's Law Dictionary, it says a person. So you actually have to look up two words, because once you see citizen is defined as a person and there's more to it, person is a corporation. So they're basically the same thing. That's why they're always calling you a citizen. And I'm going to explain why this is relevant to the voting. So I'm making there's a method to the madness. Then you have the 15th Amendment, which was February 3rd of 1871. You notice these are all around the time of the Civil War. It's the 15th Amendment is the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state or account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So with these amendments, they first define legally the word slavery as involuntary servitude. Now, what does that mean? That means the government cannot take a gun to you and force you to do something. Then they legally define the term citizen, which you hear politicians say all the time. And again, ignorance of the law is not excuse. So the legal definition of the word citizen is a person, which is a corporation that has partial rights of a human being. And they legally define the United States. If you look up the Act of 1871 and research this, you'll find that the term United States is nothing more than a registered corporate name. If you think of a corporation, like for example, Walmart, if I said to you, what is the corporation of Walmart? You might think of a business, as far as a building. That's just a place. You might think of, oh, that the main headquarters where the main people meet. Well, that's just an office building. What is the corporation known as Walmart? It's the name Walmart. That is the corporate entity. That's why if you've ever had a business and you had it incorporated, the only thing they ask is you send in money to register the name. So the term United States is nothing more than a registered trademark name that is located in the District of Columbia, which is owned by the Bank of London and the Rothschilds since the 1800s and was confirmed in 1933 when we went bankrupt, which is also the same year, I think, of the Social Security tax, and also the year they confiscated all the gold. In other words, they tried to pay back the debt with all of our gold that no longer is what they claim it to be. So what does this have to do with voting? Now, the first thing you need to vote is you have to have identification. Okay, what's the first bit of identification you could show? That's your driver's license, right? That's what most people use. Now, to get a driver's license, one of the first things they ask you for is to check a box that says, are you a U.S. citizen? Now, if you want to get a driver's license, you have to click yes. You have to check yes. Okay. So, did they put a gun to your head and make you click that box or write that box yes? No. You did it on your own servitude. In other words, you volunteered. So, according to the 13th Amendment, which is legally defined as involuntary servitude, they did not force you to check that box. You did it on your own free will, which right there, legally, the 13th Amendment no longer protects you. Now, if you know anything about law, law is based on presumption. They are presuming you know what you're doing, because it would be rather silly to sign something that you did not fully understand. That's why, like for sports figures and movie stars, when they do contracts, they don't just sign a piece of paper. They get lawyers to research every word. And we could do that too, but we choose not to because we're not educated in how things really work. So you volunteer your servitude, and they're assuming that when you clicked yes or checked the yes box, that you knew what you were signing. Because remember, ignorance of the law is no excuse. You cannot shoot somebody in the head and a cop go to arrest you and you say, oh, I didn't know I could do that. The cop is not going to say, oh, you didn't know? Oh, okay, have a nice day. You're going to be arrested nonetheless. So ignorance of the law is no excuse. So they've prepared this situation. So how is this relevant with voting? Okay, when you go to register to vote, one of the first things they are going to ask you to check is, are you a U.S. citizen? Now, again, do they put a gun to your head? First of all, does any government entity go into your house, drag you out of your bed, and force you to vote? No. Do they, once you were at the voting booth, which you did voluntarily, did they put a gun to your head and said, you better check this box, or you better vote this way? No. You do it voluntarily. So again, the 13th Amendment no longer protects you in the way that you think it does, because they want you to think the word slave is just African Americans, even though there have been all forms of slavery throughout history. They want you to have a divide and conquer mentality. So you'll have blacks hating whites, whites hating blacks. It's all about separation. That's why you see a lot of things like the shooting in Florida. That was to get straight people and gay people to hate each other and fear each other. It's divide and conquer. So, to keep back on track, since Washington, D.C. is owned by the Bank of London and is not part of America as you see it, and is owned by the British government, well, actually the Rothschilds, the Bank of London, when you click the box of saying, are you a U.S. citizen? What you're saying is you are volunteering your servitude to say, I am part of the jurisdiction of Washington, D.C. Now, it doesn't say that. It says the United States. But if you know about the United States, in quotes, it is nothing more than a registered trademark owned by Washington, D.C. That is why all politics, and you see the U.S. government is located in Washington, D.C. So when you vote for a president, you're voting for somebody who's in charge of the United States, which is located in Washington, D.C. So it doesn't matter if you live in Alaska, or Hawaii, or New Jersey, or Texas, or Montana, or South Dakota, or Massachusetts, or Maine, or Florida, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, etc., etc., etc. When you check the box yes, as saying, are you a U.S. citizen? You are no longer representing the state that you are in. You are now under the jurisdiction of the United States, which is located in Washington, D.C. Now, how is that relevant to the why votes don't count? Well, here's the thing. If you notice, votes are not tabulated by how many people vote. In other words, to become president, you need 270 electoral votes, and the highest to pass that to win. So in other words, you need at least 270 electoral votes to qualify to become president. The one who gets more than that ends up being the winner. So what they're saying is, for example, let's say the state of Arizona has 15 electoral votes. Now, I don't know if that's the exact number. It's irrelevant. Let's say there are 10 million people that live in Arizona. And let's say all 10 million decide we're going to vote. They all vote for Trump. Now, that state has 15 delegates. So even though 10 million people voted for Donald Trump, that's 15 delegate point votes. So you see how they can control it? Because it doesn't matter how many people vote. It's whoever gets the most votes in that area gets those delegate votes. So they can control it that way. So, because of the fact that you voluntarily chose to hit the box called, are you a U.S. citizen? You click the box yes. They didn't put a gun to your head. So the 13th Amendment no longer protects you. You don't legally understand what the definition of the legal word citizen means. And it places you under the jurisdiction of the United States, which is located in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has 2 delegate votes. So that means if every person in the state of California votes for Trump, every person in the state of Alaska votes for Trump, every person in the state of New York votes for Trump, every person in the state of Florida votes for Trump, every person from Texas votes for Trump, etc., etc. Let's say every state votes for Trump. Every person votes for Trump. That's 2 delegate votes. That's it. Now, if 3 people in our government, in our corrupt system, vote for Hillary, who wins? The millions of people who voted and didn't understand how their votes counted and got 2 delegate votes? Or the 3 people in government who voted for the opposition? The last time I checked, ladies and gentlemen, 3 beats 2. And that is why the votes do not count the way you assume they do, because people assume they tabulate all the votes together and the one with the highest amount wins. No, it goes by your state's electoral votes. And when you sign the box and check the box, yes, are you a U.S. citizen? You are saying, I am part of Washington, D.C. without knowing it, because they don't teach you this. No politician will teach you, no news media will teach you, no educational system will teach you. Why? You ever stop and think they're all controlled by the government? Who can regulate what can and cannot be said in the media? Well, isn't that the FCC? Who's that controlled by? Okay, we already know the politicians are controlled. And who are they controlled by? They're not controlled by us, because if that was the case, they'd be giving us what we want. And if that's the case, we wouldn't be rioting, we wouldn't be picketing, we wouldn't have problems. So obviously, they are not bending to the will of the people. Who are they bending the will towards? Well, people like George Soros and others with billions of dollars who pay them off to do their bidding so they live quite comfortably. One of the reasons why Obama plays so much golf. You know, it's kind of like Nero fiddled as Rome burned. Well, Obama played golf. Same thing. So the problem is, people do not understand that they willfully volunteer their servitude based on their own ignorance. But again, in media, the FCC controls what can and cannot be said. That is government owned. What about the education system? Who controls what can and cannot be taught in schools? Well, wouldn't that be the government as well? What about your food? Who controls what can and cannot be placed in your food, or what can and cannot be labeled in your food? Did you know the government makes laws that if there's a certain percentage of an ingredient that's smaller than a certain amount, it doesn't have to be listed? Government regulates that. Who controls what can and cannot be put in your medicine? Do you get the idea? It's a system controlled by the people that work for a government who work for another system. It's the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. And we're starting to see things like through the Hillary Clinton emails that it's not the people they are representing. It's the people who finance them. And that is why, with all the loopholes, a country like China or some other country can quote-unquote donate money to things like the Clinton Foundation and end up all of a sudden having special meetings set up and certain laws either passed or not passed. You ever wonder why we still have oil and gas for our main means of the ability to have transportation when we've had solar panels and energy since the 40s and 50s? Why that's not mainstream? It's because money or currency is corrupt. And until people understand this, until people start sharing this stuff, until people start waking up, all you're doing is what's happening on the screen. You see all the people sitting there literally supporting the politician, holding up their signs thinking it matters. And there's one politician and there's several dozen people on that platform. And you see the person circled walking away. If they all walk away, then the system collapses in on itself. So they want you to play the rigged game. They want you to think it matters. They want you to be angry about it. Notice how I'm speaking about this stuff in a singular tone. I'm not angry. I'm not using emotion. Because think of it this way. If you are in a burning building, and if you are going to be basing it just on your emotion, you're not going to think. You're going to panic. You're going to react. You're not going to stop and process. And you're more likely to die because you're not planning your attack. Or actually planning your escape. So let's say, for example, you come to a door and you're not sure, you see a little smoke coming out from the bottom. Well, if you're a person that doesn't process information and just reacts, you might open the door to find the flame right there and engulfs you and burns you. But a smart person, or a semi-smart person, might even touch the door a little bit. They might touch the door handle. But they'll use the palm of their hand, which will burn their hand, but if anything, it keeps them alive, because they say if they feel that the door handle is hot, then they know not to open it, but you burned your hand. The smart thing to do is use the back of your hand on the door and feel for heat. But that's the difference between people who think and process to the people who use nothing but emotion. And that's what they want in riots and protests and things like that, because it only takes one person to spark the whole area into complete chaos. So they want you to be emotionally involved. Why do you think Donald Trump is all about raising the military and raising the police force and talking about nothing but this word, and I'm sure you have it ingrained in your head at this point. You ready, ladies and gentlemen? Repeat after me. Radical Islamic terrorism. To the point where everybody's saying that. That's the new catchword. And what do they want you to do? They want you to build a wall, even though we have planes that can go over walls. They want you to have this false sense of security. They want you to be scared. They want you to be emotionally involved. So what will happen is, and I made this video and nobody really paid attention to it, when Hillary Clinton is still voted in, quote unquote, as president, people are going to be pissed because they're like, wait a minute, there's thousands of people, millions of people all rallying around Trump. And yet she still became president? Because remember, how many times has he said, oh, the system is rigged? Setting people up. I don't understand why people continue to think, well, this particular time will be different. How we can continue to be in a corrupt system. Just imagine yourself in the mafia and you don't like the boss that's in control. And the boss before did the same thing. Robbed people, murdered people, and did all these things you're all against. But the people were afraid to say anything, because every now and then, if somebody stepped out of line, you could make that person disappear. That creates fear. Fear equals control. Well, if you sit there and say, well, you know what, we need to vote these people out. Do you think the head people of any mafia are going to say, oh, my crew voted me out, I guess I'll step down? No. They'll laugh at them and probably murder some of them to make their point across. But if everybody walked away and they no longer had the protection, talking about people in the military and the people in the police force, because that's basically what you are. Because if you ever think about what police do, and like I said, I have family that's cops. Their job is not to save you, for the most part. What do cops mostly do? They're there after the fact. Oh, your house got robbed? You call the cops, what do? They file a report, and then you never hear from them again. Somebody stole your bike? Oh, call the cops. They'll come there right afterwards, they'll file a report, and you'll never hear from them again. So they're there to file reports for insurance purposes. It's all about money. It's not about saving you. Every now and then they get lucky, and yes, I'm not going to say cops don't do good things. There are plenty of things they do, but a majority of people understood that they are mostly there just to file a complaint form. And unless they're lucky enough to get there while a situation is happening, they're basically there to just make you feel a little better. But their main goal is, if there's a bank being robbed, they're right there. When there's riots, look at all the cops in military gear, ready to enforce the law. I mean, people have to understand where this goes, and I can't do this alone. I need people to share this stuff. I need people to watch these things. I need people to get the Black's Law Dictionary from at least the 5th edition or earlier, because the later editions, they change a lot of stuff to make it more difficult. Need you to get your own constitution and look up the legal definitions of the words. If you're not willing to put out the information and research, you are basically hoping that the people that are in a corrupt government are there to help you. Now, please, can anybody point out 5 politicians in their lifetime, whether they were mayors, senators, governors, presidents, vice presidents, anything? Can you name 5 people that did what they promised and did nothing but help your area become better? How about throughout history? That's going to be hard. I mean, you look at somebody like JFK, what happened to him? I mean, look up Executive Order 11110. Research all about that. You'll never hear that in the media. You'll never be taught about that in school. And I'll put it in the comment section in the live chat here. Hold on. It's 4 1s and an O. Go look it up. That's one of the many reasons why Kennedy was assassinated. He wanted to create our own government's ability to make our own money instead of borrowing money from the Federal Reserve, which is a private-owned bank that's owned by shareholders. It's all about protecting the money. That's the control. Doesn't matter who becomes president. You could have Gandhi become president. And in a corrupt system, what do you think that person's going to do? Now, let's go back to the mafia thing. And again, it could be any mafia. Okay? The system itself is corrupt. everybody's murdering and stealing from people. They all love that they're murdering and stealing from people and getting away from it because they own the cops, they own the politicians, all this different stuff. And you come along, you're Gandhi, and you say, I'm going to go into the mafia and I'm going to change it. And they elect you leader of the mafia. And you say, okay, now we're going to sell Girl Scout cookies. What do you think's going to happen to you when they decide they don't want that to happen? The whole thing is to get you to be ignorant, to be overly trusting to the wrong people. Now, again, if people in government, if they were doing good things, and they were helping the majority of people, not the select few that make lots of money, then I can understand, yeah, vote for them and participate in their game. But especially in this country, and I can't speak for anywhere else because I don't live anywhere else, is our country getting better or worse? There are more and more people that are being born with illnesses and different problems. We're having more overweight people than ever before, more depressed people from ever before, more anxiety and hate and divide and conquer, more people are getting sick. I mean, where is the benefit? People are getting poorer. There are over 110 million Americans on welfare. That's over 35% of the population is on welfare. So are we getting better? Please explain it. Your purchasing power of your money. If you had $10,000 today and you had $10,000 10 years ago, which one would be able to buy you more? 10 years ago, you would have bought a lot more things with that same amount of money. It's not that things got more expensive. It's every time they print more money, it devalues the currency, which makes it, you need more of it to make the same purchase. So I really hope people will understand what's going on. And until you research things and put in the effort, you're never going to solve the problem. You're going to keep thinking, oh, well, the game is rigged. Well, you know what? Maybe this time, if we all participate, maybe this time it won't be rigged. Come on, people. It's just ridiculous how the masses don't care. And that's why videos like this, it'll get a couple of hundred views. Maybe, if I'm lucky, 5,000. But considering we have over 350 million people in this country, you know, that's like being bitten by a microscopic organism that you didn't even know was there and you didn't feel a thing, and it's not poisonous or toxic and won't do anything. Okay. But yet, video games and reaction videos and all these other things, they'll get millions of views because they want you to be distracted. They want you to not care. The education system doesn't teach you these things because they're controlled by the very people that you put your trust in. People seem to forget how Obama was supposed to be the savior from evil Bush. You know, they talk about racism all the time. Last time I checked, we've had an African-American president for the past 8 years, and look at all the racism that's happened since that time. Do you think he's helping his own people? Or do you think he might be taking advantage of them? Why? Because you're emotional about it. How many people want to vote for Hillary just because she's a woman? Oh, let's forget all the crimes that she has and how she's lying to Congress. But also keep in mind, it's not like she's just there by herself and just saying, oh, you know what, I feel like doing all this stuff. You don't think that she has hundreds of different people that work in the system that are helping her do all this stuff, introducing her to this stuff, protecting her from this stuff? But let's point the finger at one person. Let's have a punching bag. Neither side is going to help. Neither side is going to win. Neither side is going to help you. They'll tell you they are. They're going to get you emotionally involved because, like I said, if you look at Donald Trump and everybody wants Donald Trump and they're all waving their flags, but yet he talks repeatedly about how he's into torture, he's into waterboarding, so he says torture is okay because he says it's not as bad as what the terrorists are doing. So yeah, that makes sense. So they cut off people's heads, which are wrong. So we're going to justify it by taking somebody and placing cotton over their face and pouring water into the point to where they drowned, almost drowned. Yeah, that's humane. He also is for Israel, which if you know about what's happening really in Israel, they're talking how they're destroying Palestine, and the media will never cover this stuff. He talks about a wall that's around, what, 1/16 of the country? Yeah, that's going to protect people. Build a castle. Do a video game where you have to protect your castle, and you build a wall on 1/16 of your castle and see how good that helps you. They want to build a wall around Mexico. Don't we have the Gulf of Mexico? So they can't take a boat? They can't fly over it? I mean, people, stop. I mean, people cannot be this oblivious, but you'll wave your flags. You'll think, oh, yeah, he's going to do a great job. He wants to build the military. He wants to build the police. So if they have a martial law situation, they have plenty of people to protect them. You know why they want more police and more military? It's because they're scared that their rig is getting exposed. And if you want to keep falling into their same traps, all they're going to do is create martial law. They want you to riot. They want you to be violent. They want you to react emotionally, so they have justification. Oh, look at the people rioting in the streets. They're burning buildings. They're creating havoc. We need to stop them, all for the peace of the people. And the people will sit back and cheer while you're being shot at, thrown in jail, and become irrelevant to the society. They want you to be reaction people. They want you to be angry. They want you to think your votes count. They want you all on the Donald Trump bandwagon. And when Hillary Clinton is still elected president, people are going to be pissed. They're going to riot in the streets. And guess what? It's your own faults because you thought the rigged game can be fixed. And what are they going to do? They're going to create new laws to control you even further, and the people will applaud it. Because why? Oh, look, they're helping us. Problem, reaction, solution. People really need to start learning this stuff. So as far as I'm concerned, the people that are here, on the most part, get it. Until we get the masses to get it, they're going to continue to do the same thing over and over again. If you open a door and there's a brick wall, closing it and hoping that that wall will not be there again is dumb. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. The idea is stop thinking the new people that are going to be bought and paid for, who are going to be shot and killed if they don't do what they say. Because remember, Donald Trump could sit there and say, oh, I don't fear assassination. Well, what if they said they're going to assassinate his children? You don't think that might change his mind? What if they take away all his wealth? Because I'm sure he puts a lot of his money in the banks. Well, if they shut off his bank accounts, and just think about your bank account. You know, most people put their money in the banks. Well, what happens if the banks decide to close your account or shut it down? Or say, oh, there's some technical glitch. You don't have any money in there. We looked at your account. It's a zeroed balance. What are you going to do? Fight it? You got the money to do that? My thing is, before we get completely censored and the internet gets more and more harder to speak your mind, is you have to listen to the people that make common sense. Now, I'm not sitting here saying I know everything, but at least I'm questioning things. When was the last time you heard a speech like what I'm giving, even remotely close to any mainstream media? The idea is to question things. And yeah, Peacemaker said one thing: you have to learn what we were sold. You have to unlearn what we were sold. That's why I always use that Star Wars reference when Yoda is trying to teach Luke, because he couldn't believe the Force was the way it was, because it's all based on belief. Well, there's a reason why there's the word lie in belief. Because when you believe something, it doesn't guarantee you know it. Because if all those people on that little balancing beam believe that, I believe if I walk away, that politician will still stand there. Well, that's wonderful until they walk away and find out their belief was irrelevant because he fell to his death. You have to unlearn what you have learned. Or better yet, you have to unlearn what you've been programmed. That's what school is all about. It's all about teaching you. Get work, respect authority, put money in a bank. They don't tell you that it's not money anymore, it's currency. They don't tell you that we borrow money from the Federal Reserve, which is a foreign bank owned by the very shareholders we bailed out. They don't tell you that our country sold us all out on February 21st, 1871 from the 41st Congress. They got paid lots of money. They were protected. And all they had to give up was 10 square miles of our country. No big deal, right? Until you realize the way that they tricked everybody into believing that their votes count because they are living in Alaska, or they're living in Hawaii, or they're living in California or Washington, or so on and so forth. So all I have to say is you got to do what you feel is right. And that is, first you have to research. If you base everything on a belief system, you are going to be easily controlled. because a belief is nothing more than what you see and your perception of it, and you're hoping that it's right. And actions speak louder than words. Look at our history. I mean, remember in World War II when they talked about the nuclear bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, how it was supposed to end the war? But even though for days it continued on, and it wasn't until the Russians started invading Japan that they all of a sudden, that's when they gave up. People need to research their history. Because remember, Russia was neutral when it came to Japan until the end. When we dropped those 2 bombs, you would think that if that made that much of an impact, they would have given up right then and there. 3 or 4 days later, they did nothing, and it wasn't until Russia decided to no longer stay neutral and started invading Japan is when they said, wow, we can't do this anymore, we got to stop. People have to understand history, but you notice we haven't used a nuclear weapon since, and they basically tried to teach you that nuclear weapons are the deterrent for war. How many wars have we had since World War II? How many hundreds of wars have we had? People have to look at the bigger picture. You have to think. If you are basing your belief system on what other people tell you, then congratulations, you are being led. If you can't think for yourself and make your own opinions, that doesn't make you right. It just means you are no longer allowing somebody else to control your thoughts. And yes, Peacemaker is right. By their actions ye shall know them. Look at our governments. Are the people, just in the United States alone, are people getting richer or poorer? Are jobs more abundant here, or are they becoming harder and harder to get? Are people happier here, or are they more angry? Are there more birth defects now, or less birth defects now? We're supposedly so technologically advanced. I mean, look over in China. Look up, Google China robotics, and look at all the places they have where they're creating these amazing technologically advanced robotic systems. Where's that here in America? They tell you that we're the wealthiest nation in the world, and yet we are almost $20 trillion in debt. How are you wealthy if you owe money? A country that has $0 is wealthier than the United States because they don't owe $20 trillion. How do people not get this? You wave your flags, you think everything's great. Did Donald Trump talk once about Executive Order 11110? Did he talk about how we need to make our own money so we don't have to borrow it from a foreign bank? Because who do you think pays for it? When you put your money in the bank, ladies and gentlemen, what they do is they gamble with your money on Wall Street. And when they win, they pocket the extra money. When they lose, they all of a sudden need a bailout. And the government supplies them with a bailout that they borrow from the Federal Reserve, which the shareholders who are using that to play the Wall Street game are the ones who own it. Do they give themselves nothing? And who do you think they give the bill to? They give it to us. It's called taxes. And you believe it goes towards bridges and roads. Well, look at the town around you. Are all your bridges and roads in great condition? All the schools up to date? Is there a reason why we're not #1 in education? What are we #1 in anywhere? So where's all those taxes going to? Maybe in the pockets of the wealthy. And then the Democratic Party will mislead you by saying, oh, we're going to tax the rich. That's wonderful. The top 1%, probably 90% of their income is overseas. You can't touch that money. If you have an offshore account, and that's why all these businesses have all their corporations overseas, well, the IRS can't take any taxes from something that is not under their jurisdiction. So you could sit there and say, oh, we're going to tax the wealthy, and the average stupid person will say, oh, that's a great idea, but they don't realize that the rich people are much smarter, and they take their money and place it in offshore accounts, which is untouchable. So how can you tax and take percentage of money that's not there? People don't want to understand it because it makes it easier. Because if you wanted true freedom, then you would be responsible for yourself. You would have to be responsible for other people, potentially. And people don't want that. It's like it being in a bad relationship. Yes, the person may beat you. Yes, the person may cheat on you. Yes, the person may insult you. Yes, the person may neglect you. But if they are taking care of you, eventually you're just like, you get used to it. People need to understand what money is. And like Peacemaker says, money isn't even money, it's debt. Slavery, working against your own will. You think you go to your job, you may like your job. But if you had all of a sudden you rubbed a magic lamp and a genie came out, and they said you have two choices. You can have a job that you love, but you have to do it all the time, and it's going to take away all your freedom. Or you can go on some kind of beautiful, luxurious island, have all the people and friends you want, and do anything you want, party all day, have no consequences, no bills, no need for money. Which would you pick? I guarantee you, majority of people would want I want to just do whatever I want. So even if you have a job you love, you're doing it why? Because you need to make quote unquote money to pay for the bills, to buy the things that you think you need. It's a debt system that keeps you enslaved. They talk about the fiscal cliff and the debt ceiling, when that's nothing more than them borrowing money from a foreign bank, and they're not giving you anything. They're typing numbers into a bank account. Wouldn't it be nice if you borrowed $10,000 and when you had to return it, all you had to do, let's say you owe $15,000 after interest, and all you had to do is type in the numbers 15,000, hit enter, and that's your payment. That's what they do to us. Because let me ask you something, ladies and gentlemen. Ask anybody that thinks this stuff is a bunch of bullshit. Please tell me what the Federal Reserve builds. What do they sell? What do they manufacture? What do they create? Nothing. And yet they have an endless supply of quote-unquote money to give out. And yet they can give $400 million to Iran or whatever country, it doesn't matter. But there are millions of people on welfare here. You don't think that would have benefited the people instead of giving that money to other countries, that they gave it to its own people? So who are the politicians really for? There are 110 million Americans on welfare. And yet we can give millions of dollars to other countries for silly little things. So who are your people really helping? Donald Trump wants to help Israel. How does that help us? You got to look at the bigger picture. And yes, it's nice to help other people, but if it's at the expense, just imagine if your mother and father decided that instead of feeding and clothing you and your brothers and sisters, they decided to help the neighbors in another town and give all of that money to some stranger down the street while you go starving. That's what our government is doing to us, but yet the majority of people wave their flags. They'll just dismiss, oh, wait, they must be perfect because, the Republican side, they're perfect, aren't they? Democratic side, they're perfect, aren't they? And yet, every time you get fooled. So everybody wants this Republican president. Everybody wanted in the past a Democratic president. And you still think it's going to matter. So if you want to vote, if you want to go there and check that box voluntarily, if you want to not understand what the law means, by all means, if it makes you feel good, go and vote. And when you find out that Hillary Clinton is still president or Obama ends up staying for a third term, and people get mad and they riot in the streets and they start destroying things, and all of a sudden that added military and police force who is there to protect and serve, they just don't specify who, will be throwing people in jail. They'll reinstate publicly martial law, even though it's been there since the 1800s. And you'll see where your freedom is gone. And by the time you realize it, it'll be too late. And Ronkamo says, why does it matter? Why does what matter? You'd have to be specific. Every country in the world is in debt. I mean, like Peacemaker was saying, England is 500% debt to GDP. Is there a country in the world that is doing well financially? Notice that all the countries are in debt, but yet all the politicians in all these countries are very, very well off. Think about that. Most countries on this planet are in financial debt. I mean, look at Japan. They're so technologically advanced, but they keep reevaluating their currency and printing money like there's no tomorrow, devaluing it. And they say it's good for trade, which is good if you're a person that does trades, not good for the people because your products cost more. Okay, so Philip Carubia says Iceland. Okay, there's one. Can you name 50 more? We have hundreds of different countries in this world. So far we got one. Can we pick more than one Iceland? Not a good percentage if you think about it. But yet, if you look at all the countries around the world, the majority of them are financially suffering. You notice the politicians in every one of them are very well off. They live in nice fancy homes. They drive nice fancy cars. They're protected by their police force. Anybody can go into your house and rob you blind if they wanted to. You can call the cops afterwards to file a report, but try and go to any politician's house. You'll be shot down before you even get within 100 yards. So if we want to keep playing their political game, is there any wonder why things don't change? I mean, we supposedly had World War I, then we had World War II. How many wars have we had since then? Has anything gotten better? And we're supposedly civilized? We're supposed to be technologically advanced? The only technological advancements we have is being able to play Pokemon Go on your cell phone and better tools to murder people, instead of taking all that money and feeding the homeless and creating world-changing events to make the world a better place. They still want war. They still want you to use oil. They still want you to use their monetary system because it benefits them and makes us poorer. When do you get it? So if you want to think your votes count, please, by all means, on November 8th, go there, have a great time, and just do your volunteer your servitude, which doesn't protect you by the 13th Amendment, and think, oh, this time it will be different. Even though every president has never really done anything to make this country better, I'm sure this time it will be different. My question is to the people, why do you think this will be different? Because they said so? Because they said things? Because they made promises? Remember, ladies and gentlemen, Obama's policy was based on change. He was based on a more open government. How'd that work out? Now, when he said we're going to promote change, he didn't say what kind of change. So technically he wasn't lying, because people don't pay attention to words. Change could be good or bad. He didn't say we're going to create positive change, and even if he said that, for whom? Look in your bank account. You probably have plenty of change. So I'm going to end the video right here, because usually, I make very long videos, and when they're too long, most people don't want to listen. They'll watch something like Batman v Superman or Suicide Squad or some kind of ridiculous movie like The Sausage Party that's an hour and a half to 2 hours long. That's okay. But a video that can actually help increase your mind's expansion and help you think for yourself, that's too much for some people. So if you want to leave a comment, you can. If you want to share it, that's great. I want to thank the people that took the time to care enough to watch. Unfortunately, we are the minority, not the majority. And because this Constitution is based on the consent of the governed, and consent doesn't mean you agree, it means also that you don't disagree. Your silence is the same as consenting. I'll give you a prime example of that before I go. Let's say you're the father and you have a 16-year-old daughter who's going out on her first date, and you don't like the guy who's taking her out. He comes to the door, he's wearing nothing but a tank top, he's got tattoos all over the place, shaven head, he's wearing spike bracelet, he's got Nazi insignias along his arms, real delinquent kind of person. You've heard rumors that he's been locked in juvenile homes, and the guy says, all right, I'm taking your daughter out. You could say, okay, go ahead. You could say, no, there's no way in hell, or you could say nothing. So as you say nothing, you watch your daughter go out with this gentleman. So you gave your consent by not acting. There's a reason why the word con is in your Constitution, because you're being conned. It's all a game. That is one of the reasons why when you're in trouble, you have to go to court. Well, when you go to court, where else can you find a court? How about a tennis court or a basketball court? It's all a game. That's why you have acts and codes in law. Well, where else can you find an act? How about in a play? What about a code? What is a code? It's a secret message. That's why you have to decode it. But if you look it up, our laws are all acts and codes. So they're telling you all in the words. It's hidden in plain sight. You don't see it, and you're not told about it So you trust the people that are nothing but corrupt in thinking they're actually doing nice things. So until people want to take responsibility, until people want to learn the truth, wave your flags all you want. Yell at people like me, make your ridiculous political argument statements based on the fact of nothing that you have been taught has made sense, but you believe it, so you're using your emotion instead of your logic. Don't spread this information, wave your flags, and see how much better things will get this time. Because, these people really care about you. I hope you see this sarcasm. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time to comment. And Trish Maxwell says, Chris, you're an asset to the planet. Never stop what you're doing. I'm going to do my best. I keep trying. It's definitely frustrating that I've been doing this for years. I mean, I've been talking about the corrupt system for years, and I got laughed at, ignored, mocked, and you're seeing it now more and more. Just look at all the WikiLeaks that are coming out. But I think there's a reason why it's all coming out now. They want people to get pissed, and when they're pissed, they're going to react instead of think. They want you to riot. They want you to have revolutions, because we all know how revolutions really solve the problem throughout history. They want you emotionally involved. They want you so much into Donald Trump. They want you to think so much that there's corruption, that when he ends up not being president, they could plant the seed that you knew it was corrupt, even though it's been corrupt for centuries. You're being led, and it's your own free will that's doing it because you're playing the game. If you do like the one person's doing in this picture, that they decide to walk away, the system collapses on itself. But people have been told if it's too good to be true, it usually is. Last time I checked, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. In other words, the shortest, easiest way is usually the best way. But they don't want you to think that way, because then if you thought for yourself and realized that they need us more than we need them, well, then their game is over. Time for a new system. And that doesn't mean being violent. I will never preach violence. Violence begets violence. You have to walk away. You have to no longer participate. They want you to revolt. They want you to react. They want you to riot, because then they have justification to control you further. It hasn't worked since. Name a country in history that has had a revolution that is now a utopia. Can you explain to me one? They don't work. They work temporarily, but they don't work. If something doesn't work, it's time to change it. If you keep doing the same thing, it's your fault. Most people don't want to hear that. Most people, it's easier to get mad at me, insult me, ignore me. It's easier that way. If you want easy, you're going to get exactly what you give. You give nothing, you will get nothing. So stop complaining. And I'm not talking about the people listening, because the people listening, they pretty much get it. And yeah, MS Brenda says, my kids still think I'm nuts. Well, you could tell people in the world to think you're nuts to say, are you basing it on what you're told? Are you basing it on your emotions? Are you basing it on your feelings? Or are you basing it on your truth from your research and hard work of you checking it out? Tell your kids or anybody out there to point out an air molecule. Look all around you. There is an infinite amount of air molecules surrounding you, and yet you can't see them. You can't smell them. You can't touch them. You can't taste them. So technically you could say, wait a minute, I guess I don't believe in them. Because aren't you told that if you can't see it, because, seeing is believing. If you can't see air molecules and you say, well, I guess maybe I don't believe in air molecules, does that mean you're not breathing them? So belief is irrelevant. It's nothing more than your own perception. And I've used this example before. If you take two people, put them in separate rooms, and you show them a tube of toilet paper, just an empty tube of toilet paper, and you show person number one, you take the round end and flash a light to it, so there's a shadow of a circle on the wall, and you say to them, what image do you see on the wall? They'll write down a circle. And then in the second room, you do the long end of the tube, and you shine a light on that, and it shows a rectangle on the wall, and you say to person number two, what image did you see? And they will write down rectangle. Then you put both of them in a room, and you don't tell them what they showed. They just said, okay, you put in a loudspeaker and say, we actually showed each of you the tube of toilet paper and its shadow. What was the shadow? One will say circle, and the other one will say rectangle. And then the other one will be like, wait a minute, what are you, crazy? It was obviously a rectangle. And the other person would say, no, you idiot. It was a circle. It was clear as day. How could you see a rectangle when it was clearly a circle? They're both right. But because of their perception and they're not told about more of the information that they need, they're going to hate each other to the point where they might fight and kill each other over their own belief. They're both right. So I'm going to end this video here. It's an insane world, but remember, guys, truth is stranger than fiction. If you want to believe your votes count, by all means, go do it and see what happens. And then you'll get angry, you'll feel like a fool, and it'll be your fault because you didn't listen. Do you think I'm doing this because I have too much free time? Or do you think I'm doing it because I care, because I want real change? I don't want the illusion of change. As wonderful as a dream may be, it's still just a dream. If you want to spend your whole life in bed dreaming about something that is not real, well, your whole life is going to pass by. So don't do that. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you all have a great day. Spread this truth and just be good to one another and learn about it. Get your own Black's Law Dictionary. Get your own constitution and look up the legal definitions and learn the truth. These are the things no politician, no media, and no school will ever teach you. So thanks for watching. Share this. Give it a thumbs up, please. I need your help. I need your support. And you all have a great day. Happy voting.